Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlot Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today, I'm joined by a pair of completely normal co-hosts, Tanner Dykstra and Abram Biener, and today we're here to review Joker, Folie, Deux, and give you our thoughts on this cinematic event film. If you have seen this film and you want to talk to us about it, leave a comment, join our Discord server, all these things. I gotta stop doing an intro so he doesn't break his neck. Tanner, give me your thoughts on Joker Folie Deux.
Alrighty, so I rewatched. Abram and I rewatched the first Joker movie.
Yeah.
And
You had to implicate him.
Yeah, I did have. I mean, it was his idea.
Sure.
To be clear. And I felt the same way going into that viewing as I did coming out. That the first Joker movie is fine. Like, it obviously has its flaws, but I think it's largely inoffensive to me. Joker Folie Deux, however, I think I summarized something along the lines of, it's if you try to make a response to a empty and stupid movie, you get something emptier and stupider. And that is exactly what Joker Folie Deux is. I think basically every aspect you can approach it from is inferior to the original work.
Sure. I mean, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But I also think that the first Joker movie is great.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I would have given that many more awards than it even got in 2019. I really do love that movie. And I don't know what I was expecting going into Joker Folie Deux, but it wasn't this.
Uh-huh.
But that's awesome. And so I like this movie quite a bit, but I can't. This is my megalopolis. I can't defend any particular aspect of it. I do think there are some elements that are like genuinely well done, but there are also elements that I'm like, no, yeah, I've got no defense. But as a thing that was made for $200 million and the way it came out, it is insane that this movie was made.
Yeah. And
that made it incredibly enjoyable to me. And also, where some people found boredom in some elements of this film, I was not bored during this movie. So I was pleasantly surprised by Joker Folie Deux.
And now, without Folie Deux, I'll share my thoughts.
Very good.
He tried to push that one on me earlier today. He's like, when you do the intro, make sure you say...
He was beta testing the joke.
Yeah.
I would say that I am not a fan of Joker 2019.
Okay.
Yes.
Indeed, I would say that I feel very strongly negative thoughts and emotions and things towards that movie. So that's what I was coming into Joker 2 with.
Just pure vitriol.
Yeah, I really don't like that movie very much. I think Joker Folie Deux is bad in different ways.
Sure.
Okay.
And in some ways, I have a lot more respect for Folie Deux than I do the original.
Okay.
I think that the movie, to me, lives and dies by this sort of meta narrative that Todd Phillips is clearly writing into the script, and then remembering that he wrote the script in the last 25 minutes of the script. I think that as a musical, it fails. I think as a courtroom drama, it fails.
Right.
I think what I'm tickled by in Folie Deux, and what I find a sort of like Matrix Resurrections type respect for, even though I like that movie a lot more than this one, is what we'll get to in the spoiler portion of this discussion, which is just clearly what Todd Phillips thinks Joker 1 was, and how he felt a need to, to be as non-spoiler as possible, maybe diffuse Joker 1 with Joker 2.
Well,
this is a very irregular. It's very the decisions made in this film are so irregular that I think we should get to spoilers as soon as possible.
This is a spoiler review now. Boop, press the spoiler button.
Oh wait, do we recommend you see it?
I think people should see it, because I think it's so crazy that this happened. And for me, it's like, well, that was just such a bold, creative decision that I'm like, you got to at least see it for yourself. And even though I felt the exact opposite 1 week ago with Megalopolis.
yes.
And I think the two films are actually surprisingly comparable, because it's very funny that Francis Ford Coppola, who last week I said had sort of pressed the big red button and nuked himself cinematically, I think that he also gave Todd Phillips a button. I think there was a sale on big red buttons.
Oh, I see. Big red
at the movie store.
Career nuke buttons.
Yeah, where you're just like, well, let's just end it all here.
I won't go as far as to say that like you shouldn't watch this, but if you're watching this video and you are somehow an even-keeled Joker 2019 fan, and you're like, you want to sort of protect your sensibilities, I would say don't see it, because it just seems to be something that fans of the first movie do not like at all. But I would never.
I'm one of the lucky few that likes both.
Yeah, I would never say, hey, don't go see this
Yeah.
movie. I don't think, in very rare cases. So if you're interested in it, go see it. Harvest your own thoughts on it for sure.
I think that if you are a low IQ person
Uh-huh.
who is also a Joker fan, and thus you like Joker 2019
That
for the
Venn
wrong-
diagram is a circle.
for the reasons Todd Phillips thinks you do,
Mhm.
don't go see the movie because you'll be annoyed.
Yeah.
If you're a regular person, don't go see it because it's boring. That's my
Yeah.
feeling of the movie.
So here's where I want to start. I have been thinking a lot about people sort of like, because this like vitriolic wave, and then the reclamation seems to be happening very quick.
Sure.
Because
Sorry, are you talking about Folie Deux?
yes, Folie Deux. So because the negative response became overwhelming probably about 48 hours ago.
And it dropped to 8% Rotten Tomato opening
Yes.
day. To
Yeah, let's get a
40.
live reaction to that.
And then today, I've even seen some people being like, I've seen the movie, and actually, as I've thought about it more, I think it's kind of interesting. I cannot get on board with that. I think there is very little interesting about this movie, and I find zero creative boldness in it, I would say.
See, I disagree, and I think this is probably the biggest point.
33% of Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
Another 7% from like this afternoon?
Yeah, and
Wow.
36%
Yeah.
audience
Yeah.
score. So this is an across the board pan film.
That's right. That's right.
So now we're doing full spoilers.
Full
Yes.
spoilers.
I think Tucker and I were talking about this earlier today.
Okay.
When you look at Joker 2019 in a vacuum,
Mm-hmm.
where Joker 2019 ends is Joker inciting a
Riot.
Mhm.
anarchist riot that he seems to take some sort of he seems to revel in that.
Yeah.
And so the Joker 2 that you anticipate is him becoming this like an anarchic messiah, essentially.
Okay.
And
Actively.
this film is not that.
No.
And
Well, see,
so
I would say that those were not my expectations going into the film.
sure.
Is that I anticipated this to be a diffusing of the first movie, a look at like Joker 2019 and the character as we like tear the layers away again.
Now, is that because you had heard about sort of the more musical courtroom nature of this film? Or because I think what to his point is when Joker ends, you're like, where does this story continue
Sure.
from here? The
Logically
energy,
speaking,
yeah, the energy coming out of that film is that it's going to build to Arthur Fleck, this character,
Mhm.
becoming more of a figure, becoming more actively criminal,
Mhm.
and of course 5 years later, and it probably mess of a production cycle and scripts
Yeah.
and rewrites and things results in a Joker Folie Deux that does not continue the energy of the first film in almost any way, and that is what makes it for me significantly worse than Joker. But I think also the fact that it is so different is why I also, alongside with Abram, reject the idea of it not being cinematically bold, because this is not a safe blockbuster in any way. This is a like basically straight up courtroom drama for a majority of the film, like just sitting in courtrooms and sitting in prisons, and it is a musical for the other part.
Sure.
And then there's like a 20-minute mishmash at the end that's like, oh, this is kind of what the first movie was like, but there's not another $200 million IP blockbuster
I
like
think
this before.
For me, there is a middle ground between subverting expectations and being a bold filmmaker.
I don't know if this movie's subverting expectations. I think it's just giving you something really different. My problem with Joker, if I can boil my problem with Joker 2019 down into one sentence, is that it's a movie about nothing. That's my problem with it. I don't think the movie Joker has a worldview, and so when I think about the idea of another one, I'm thinking about another movie that's principally concerned with aesthetics. And maybe in that you try to have some sort of moment where Joker is haunted by the scale of the revolution, quote unquote. I'm using revolution most aesthetic way possible. Like, to me, that's what the movie was gonna be on concept. What we get from Todd Phillips instead is not even anything close to that. What we get is just like him essentially, in my opinion, conscientiously objecting from making another movie like Joker.
Yeah.
And I think that just doesn't really work. Because if you look at Matrix Resurrections, a movie I like a lot.
Same.
Part of what is interesting to me about that is you have, was it only Lana who directed that? You have her pushing against the mandate to make this film, but then also delivering something that is very sweet and very compelling, and I think works very nicely as its own piece of work.
Absolutely.
I think that the issue with this film is that Todd Phillips is like, my point is that Joker was like a big and scary cultural event, and I want to essentially dump a bucket of water on that.
Mm-hmm.
And if the whole movie builds to like a complete anticlimax in a way that I think you have to, in my opinion, dislike that first movie to get enjoyment out of.
Sure. Sure.
Like I think that is a really hard sell, and that's why I would agree with Tucker that this is a film that I'm surprised was allowed to release this way.
Yeah.
I think that it's very funny to hear about like, oh, DC wanted Todd Phillips to take over. I think all that stuff's very strange when you watch this movie. And for a lot of it, it's just sort of like a meandering character study about Joker and Harley Quinn. And then it suddenly, on a dime, becomes actually Joker wasn't real. And this was all something like a genie I'm trying to put back in the bottle.
So I think the if we're talking about like the production of it and how this film was made in its current state, I mean there are editing things that we will get to eventually, but from the concept, the inception of this film, I come at it from a standpoint of Todd Phillips didn't have anything to really say concisely with the first Joker, and subsequently I think the Warner Brothers executives who probably greenlit this thing are not smart enough to realize that this would also not click with people.
I don't know. The reason I disagree with that is because this is a musical lacking a lot of, like, there's not a ton of violence in this film, and it's lacking almost entirely in iconography and theming and background information that the IP that made the first movie make $1 billion is why it's so popular. Like this is a rejection of IP blockbuster filmmaking by just making a drama half musical.
Though what I will say is, if I'm a dumb WB executive, I didn't expect Joker 2019 to make $1 billion, and Todd Phillips delivered on that somehow. And so I'm like, well, I guess maybe this guy has some sort of secret sauce and he can do this again. And like that is I think as far as that thinking goes.
And I want to make a difference between like just rejection and like a very deliberate and creative subversion, which is what I think you find in Matrix Resurrections and also obviously The Last Jedi. Those are movies. Those are movies I really like a lot. But those are movies that I think are more clearly understanding what they're doing and operating in a framework that is directly attacking tenets of the previous work. I think part of the problem with Joker 2 is that there's really nothing in Joker 1 to attack. It's like a feeling to attack, because Joker 1 had this like cultural concern around it that it was going to lead to shootings, and it has been since, the aesthetics of which have been taken by this sort of far right Sigma online crowd. But
I mean, like The Matrix, to be fair,
but none. In the case of Joker, none of that stuff's in the movie.
Yeah,
right.
It's
not even like the red pill, blue pill thing from Matrix, which has been taken and completely like misunderstood.
Yes,
Joker is like an image, right? The image of Joker is the big cultural hullabaloo out of that first movie. So Todd Phillips is not saying, okay, there's a structure to Star Wars, I'm going to subvert it. There's a structure to The Matrix in these sequels, I'm going to subvert it. He's saying the idea of Joker scared people and scared me in hindsight. I'm going to try to do something about that. And I think the way he tries to do it, by killing Joker at the end, by having him start crying on stage and have Harley Quinn walk away and all these people walk away, it just doesn't really work because there's no trope it's subverting.
I think if I can diagnose it,
all right,
I believe
Dextra MD.
Yes. Beep 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 beep.
What is that?
I don't know. I was speaking into my stethoscope and also holding it.
But that was kind of like a radio thing, like an
like
RKO picture.
Yeah. If I can diagnose it, I think that everyone involved, both the super fans and Todd Phillips and whomever, think that Joker is more important than it actually is.
Yeah.
And I think it stops and ends there. It's like he's like, I need to do something about this, and there's nothing in Joker to do something about. There's nothing to for me that there's nothing to respond to, and the response itself was muted anyway. That it all just comes out in the wash for me. Like
Yeah.
it all just boils down to not a whole lot, because Todd Phillips doesn't know how to respond to Joker because he didn't make anything actually provocative in Joker. He just had the aesthetics of being provocative.
Which this film doesn't even really have either.
No.
Which is to your point. There's very little graphic violence in the film.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is something that the first Joker trafficked in, and if it wasn't that, it was trading on like a feeling of grime. Again, it's Taxi Driver, which has been said 8 billion times by that fucking movie. But
The Prince King of Grime.
That's right.
Was the Clown Prince of Grime.
Yes,
Yeah,
there you go. No.
None of that is in this film, and that's not the thing.
Or much less of it.
That's what's really interesting to me about it, because it's not the provocation in Joker 2019 is, in my opinion, twofold. We're talking about this. One is that it's a very beautiful film. One thing I could never take away from 2019 Joker is it's shot extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Images like him stabbing the big guy and being covered in his blood and these close-ups, or just the strange stuff Joaquin Phoenix does with his body in that movie. There's a real intriguing sense to it, and then you sort of dangle, I think, like a little bit further than a lot of your average American moviegoers' understanding of like politics and different ideologies.
Yeah.
It creates this sensation that Joker is like really charged in a way that I don't find Joker 2.
I think that charge wore off very quickly.
Definitely. Yeah. And so here's the interesting thing about we're finding it. Finally, the interesting thing about Joker Folie Deux
Okay, here we go.
is that I think that this movie is worse in basically every way than the first one. And I actually think that in execution, this movie it can be attacked from a lot of angles, and I think we should get into some of the more specific critiques of it.
I agree, yeah.
But I think, again, for me, it is a concept versus execution thing, but at the end of the day, the concept of it and then also the sort of meta narrative of it weighs so heavily, in my opinion. Like I'm still like, I find this a fascinating cinematic work. Again, kind of a nuke button of like, this is going to lose everyone involved a ton of money. I think that it is more than likely going to make Todd Phillips hard for Todd Phillips to get major projects like this again, if he even wants to. But I kind of like that, and I kind of respect that. And I also think that for me, I also do want to make sure that I give compliments to this movie where I think it is deserved, because I don't think that it is all bad. But I do want to get into a little more specifics.
If I can say one more thing on your point.
Okay.
Because then we'll move off of it. But I agree with you about the high level stuff.
Sure.
And that's my biggest praise of the film is that simply I think it's interesting that the mythos of the Joker is brought to such an unsatisfactory end. Mm-hmm. And that's where I agree with you 100%. Sure. That's where I think the boldness is.
Totally.
Because the Joker is this like multi-generational icon, this enigma, who we just
Edward.
Yeah. Who we just see.
I thought maybe someone else in the prison would be like, my name is Edward. Like,
And we just see him like completely fall apart and be a wiener and then get stabbed in prison and die.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that there's this idea of like the Joker's impact reverberates his other characters, but the Joker as we knew him and defined him as he was as a cultural icon before the movie Joker and after the movie Joker, Todd Phillips did his best to try to like erase that. And I at least think that's interesting.
Yeah.
So that's the last thing I want to say from this point before we get into your specifics.
Yeah. Because we talk about all these things. It is, again, it's more from the fact that this isn't in energy-wise and tone-wise the same as the first film. Narratively, as Aaron and I were arguing, it doesn't continue that obvious story. And what we get instead is a very messy screenplay that is not confident in its own ideas of character arcs and, frankly, like internal logic. And then also a musical, kind of like bus crashes into the side of that.
Here's the issue with the musical part of it. If we want to talk, if we want to get specific, let's talk about like the hook that initially got people interested in this project. Todd Phillips says it's gonna be a musical, and for why? I think it's basically because he's like, I wonder if I can do this,
and he did.
and he by definition made a musical. It's not a good one. I don't think the musical sequences for me are the best part of the movie, but I don't think they're especially good.
Yeah.
I think they're only elevated by the musical talent that is Lady Gaga,
Yeah.
and the general like implementation of the music, but the direction or the setting or anything like that, where Joaquin Phoenix performances in those sequences are not especially powerful to me. And generally the musical element of it is supposed to be this convoluted metaphor for like putting on a show and like entertaining the masses with like his persona as the Joker, which is also diffused.
Well, I got a
But-
question.
Yeah.
How is that convoluted, though? I mean, I feel like that's a pretty straightforward thing. I think it's not particularly deep thematically, but I do think that in terms of taking that theme of Arthur Fleck as a person that is for his whole life been trying to put on a show and consistently failing at it, but in his own head he sees himself as a performer. I think externalizing that for the screen through musical numbers and through Joaquin Phoenix doing performances and having these big sort of soundstagey sets and things and big jazz bands. I don't think that's convoluted. I think that is a point A, point B, but the thing in the middle that I think makes it interesting and why, again, for me, I don't think these are fantastic musical sequences. I think I enjoyed basically all of them to as much as I did. But the fact that this is technically a Batman adjacent film that was made for $200 million by Warner Brothers, that is the fact that this was a musical, that it is a musical, that there are musical numbers about the performance that this troubled man is giving in his own head.
He's more than one in trouble. He's like dark and twisted.
Very, very, very troubled man.
Yeah.
The fact that was externalized and executed on, I think is very, very interesting. And I just don't see it as convoluted. I think I see it as like, that's where I see confidence, is like you have this idea of him being a performer and seeing himself in that way, and then going to Warner Brothers and being like, this is going to be a musical. It's like, that's crazy that he did that.
I just
pretty fitting.
Yeah.
So when Chad and I were rewatching Joker 1, I was saying, man, it kind of feels like he wanted this one to be a musical too, because there is a musical flourish to it, to the way music is used, to the sort of sense of dance that is throughout it. I think what's disappointing to me about Folie Deux is that
maybe we need to go rewatch War Dogs and Starsky and Hutch and Hangover and see if those are also musicals. Maybe Todd Phillips has got this right in his whole filmography, and we are only now picking up on it.
I think that these, I don't think these are confident sequences. I think they're really lame, because at least for me, what I like out of a musical is, I like if we can either choose that the singing is taken as part of the logic of the universe, or if the singing is definitely happening in a different like plane of reality entirely. And this film kind of moves between that. Sometimes Joker is singing as he's being interviewed by like the reporter, and then that's actually on TV. Sometimes,
that was a real one.
Sometimes he's singing when he finds out he might get the death penalty, and then we return, and it
was all a dream.
Yeah, and to me, that's not super satisfying. But moreover, I think that the real lack of any interesting choreography for me just ruins it. I think about like Dance in the Dark, which we watched fairly recently, which is a very grounded film in a lot of senses, but it gives itself this space for these like darkly beautiful musical performances that involve the whole
ensemble cast
and ensemble and the background actors and
it's use of props.
Those are also heightened by the otherworldly sort of ethereal nature of Bjork's music and Bjork's singing voice. Whereas with Joker Folie Deux, we want to be like, okay, we're like hearkening back to the big band 50s musicals of like the 50s and 60s. That's what we're doing here.
We get a clip from a Fred Astaire movie.
Exactly. We have the animated sequence at the beginning. It's like he's walking down the hallway and you see the bandwagon poster and all these other like famous musical posters. Some of the sequences are like a visual homage to like Top Hat and stuff like that. Yeah,
American in Paris.
Exactly. And we're casting Lady Gaga, who has this very clear jazz background and is obviously a very talented performer in that realm, as we've seen in more recent years, as she sort of developed her musical persona. And that
You don't capitalize on any of that.
No.
An American in Paris has these amazingly elaborate sequences.
Yeah, totally.
And I think
These are some of the least elaborate musical sequences I've ever seen.
And I think that that's a real disappointment to
Totally,
me,
yeah, that's fair.
especially if the idea of the film that's being posited is that Arthur
Yes.
and Joker are not only different but live in disparate realities.
Mhm.
Why isn't there a real wacky, full-bodied, $200 million
Yeah.
musical reality in this film?
So we want to do this whole thing of, okay, maybe he has multiple personality disorder. We open on an animated sequence that is me and my shadow, that is very clearly telling you that's the opening thing of the film. And it's like, okay, that is what we're walking down the line of here. Is Arthur is sort of a split personality. There is Arthur and there is Joker, and then again that gets confused as to what the film is actually saying, as to
definitely.
whether or not that is the case.
That's the worst part of the screenplay,
Yeah.
in my opinion. I think that almost every other element is pretty straightforward. It doesn't mean it's. I don't think there's any of it that's exceedingly bad outside of this sort of confusion about what it's saying about its characters, which is obviously something very major. But that I take pretty big issue with, and I think it's something that is very hard to tell where it is going. Which, to the movie's credit, I found very engaging, and why I wasn't bored during the prison and interview and courtroom sequences, because I didn't know what the answer was.
Fair.
And
Yeah.
so that sort of push and pull of, is this true? How does Arthur feel about that? How does Harley, who's influencing him in a certain way, and his lawyer, who's influencing him in a certain way, and he's kind of stuck in the middle, being ping-ponged back and forth. I found that to be for the vast majority of runtime of this film, a compelling reason to stay engaged with Arthur's internal conflict, as he doesn't know how he feels about himself. He's obviously very confused, and he's been through a lot, and he is a violent person, and he has this side to him. But then he also is a very scared person in this movie. He's a little ball for like a lot of this movie, and it's really fascinating to take the energy of Joker, which is him of the first movie, bouncing back and forth between the kinetic highs of like committing violent acts and performing, and then like not feeling strong and being sucked back down. This movie is him being sucked back down unless Harley is there until like the last 30 minutes of the film. And I found that to be pretty bold and interesting, and a different way to see this character that is just a sad, defeated wiener boy. But the problem is, this is all, I think, very interesting. But then as the movie starts to pick up its own momentum, and where I think the movie's biggest problem is in the editing, and start to like feel like it's skipping sequences and feel like we're missing important character realizations and conversations that make this all internally coherent, that is where I think the movie really falls apart. And so in that last 30 minutes, when he's like, he fires his lawyer and he comes back dressed as Joker, and I'm like, but then he's still like letting moments of like emotion out that are like feel more like Arthur than Joker. It's like, but okay, so what is true?
What is true? I mean, Tucker, it sounds like you're making a court case yourself here.
Yeah.
What is true? I do have to say one quickly. When Joaquin pulls out like the Southern lawyer bit in the joke,
really funny.
I thought that was very funny.
It's very, very funny.
Now, Mr. Puddles, you expect us to believe that your name is indeed Mr. Puddles.
He's doing a Benoit Blanc.
Yeah, I mean, he really is. It's the funniest bit. But I agree. I agree that like I think that is where Todd Phillips's insecurity with like being so finicky about like responding to Joker and what he perceives as the cultural like firebomb that was Joker. I think that's where it becomes really evident that he's worried about it.
That's the Wicked is the stickiest,
and where he's trying to undercut this character that we're supposed to feel some sort of sorry, some sort of pity for.
Sympathy,
yeah. But he continues to undercut him as he's like trying to build him up charismatically, and I think that's what really starts. That's what really falls apart. Yeah,
I mean, there's this not subtle idea throughout a lot of the film that Joker is basically being portrayed in this film the way that like a Ted Bundy is, as like a true crime
Yeah, I mean,
heartthrob.
there are many examples, many of them directed and produced by Ryan Murphy on Netflix,
Yes.
of like, okay, let's take these horrible serial killers or people who were very notorious for committing murders and like give them some background, maybe make you feel sorry
Give
for them a
them a
little bit.
movie.
Give them a movie, give
Some
them
plot.
a limited Netflix series where like maybe their backstory is a little
Yeah.
bit more complex and all of that.
And
Yeah.
so
That's an interesting part of the screenplay. Really interesting to follow up the first movie with that, of the reaction, the social reaction to that. I think that maybe that's the, like, textually, that's the most interesting part of this movie to me.
But like, what is my question is, what is added in Folie Deux that isn't already apparent in the first Joker, in terms of
Sure.
Arthur's backstory? Because like,
No, I agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
him
yeah.
being an abused kid and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
That stuff
We
is,
don't learn anything else here.
that
No.
stuff is all in Joker.
my problem with it is like the Lee Harley Quinn
Mhm.
is a stand-in for this archetype of person who is in the Ted Bundy fandom.
Yeah.
Which sounds stupid, but that's the
Yeah, it's-
thing,
it is.
and,
Yes.
and that is one of the unintended
The
consequences.
true crime junkies.
100%. And we even talk about how, I mean, Joker has his own true crime movie.
Yes.
In the narrative of the film, this is not subtle. This is
Uh-huh.
what we're evoking. This
Yeah.
is what we're talking about. I just think that it's so ham-fistedly written
Sure.
that it ends up in a place of feeling like Wattpad fan fiction to me.
Sure.
I think that the relationship between Lee and Joker is just so thin that I really don't care about it.
Mhm.
A beautiful example for me is when he is in the hole. He's in this really dank, solitary confinement room,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and she's let in, and they kiss, and she puts makeup on his face, and then she lets him fuck her.
Yeah,
and then
I mean
she
that
gets
is
pregnant.
it's Joker X Reader at that point.
Yeah, and I just think that like if Todd Phillips is trying to complicate or comment on this idea of the culture around true crime, the character of Lee is like so fanatical, and that relationship is so silly to me that I don't really see what the point is. I think it's a lot like a lot of the material in Joker 2019 for me, of like Todd Phillips is really good at making observations. I think where he fails for me is converting the observation to a message.
To a point. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with that. I also agree that the whole scene
Yeah.
is the weakest and most ridiculous part of that entire dynamic.
Yeah.
What I find very compelling about the way that Harley Quinn is worked into the screenplay of this film is that I actually think that the dynamic between the two of them and the ways in which she frankly becomes the star of the show, because he is so his self-confidence is an all-time low, and he's frankly for like the first 40 minutes of the movie he's not saying much. He's really just being pushed around, and he's being very silent, and the energy of being seen by someone brings life and energy back into Arthur. And so watching Lee like kind of push him to kind of, it seems like, be something he doesn't want to be at times, I think it is really, really fascinating. And especially when that comes around and Arthur, again, to the point of the arc of what is real about him being poorly written, he comes to this like half realization where he is the Joker, but then he breaks down in front of the jury and he's like, actually, I killed all these people, and it's like he's having this really low point. The fact that I don't like any of that writing wise, because it's like, well, what does this say? Because then he runs away. I don't know. It's really complicated. But that she keeps trying to push him back to be the Joker, be the guy that is doing crazy things, and she sets a building on fire for him, and they climb on a fence and they do all that stuff, and you see the life come back to him. I think that's really, really compelling on a character level. And then the end point where that relationship leaves off is when he comes back, because Arthur has become so infatuated with Lee that he doesn't realize he kind of realizes the manipulation, but he still is like, regardless of that, I still, she cares about me.
He has to be told that he is being manipulated,
Exactly.
and then he is doubting that fact.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't want to believe that Harley would do
Yeah.
that, or Lee, excuse
but
me.
the point I was getting to
Yeah.
is that the end of their dynamic, the last thing we see them do together
Mm.
is her be like, I don't remember exactly what was said, but it's to the point of, no, we won't be together.
Mm.
We're
You
we're
said
not
it
going
yourself. There is no Joker.
there is no Joker, and then she just leaves.
Yeah.
And that leaves, and to the point, as we'll get at, like, how the film ends and just kind of kicks him down. That's a part of that. But what I find interesting about that is what it means for Harley Quinn as a character, for Lee, in that it was never real for her, and that this infatuation isn't sustainable, and that it is based on lies, and that instead she just rejects it when she sees emotion.
No, I think it's a different. I think it's a different. We're led to believe something else about her character from the amount of story and script attention that she is given. I think that it is. I mean, from the moment she's introduced, it is very clear, it's transparent that she is in love with the character, the idea of Joker.
Yeah.
She has never developed past that point, which is, I think, a testament to Todd Phillips's poor handling of her character, or maybe female characters in general.
Sure.
Surprise, the Hangover guy is not particularly good at writing female characters, if you can believe it. And this has also been sort of shopped around in the rumor mill, or just broadly online, that it feels like a lot of Lady Gaga's sequences were cut. It feels like there is some Harley story material missing.
Yeah.
I think that you can really feel some background, some bone to her character lacking here, because it never for a moment feels as though she is genuinely in love with Arthur, and that she is only infatuated with the persona of Joker. And so that is why the dynamic is sort of uninteresting to me, because Arthur goes on this thing of, like, he doesn't come to the conclusion himself. He's told that Harley is not interested in him, and then he doubts
that she's manipulating him.
That she's manipulating him, of course. And then, that's evident from all of her actions. And so you expect a sort of pulling along, sort of maybe some deeper manipulation, but that never comes, because we a lot of times interrupt their scenes with just, it's time for a musical sequence now.
That's what I was referring to earlier with the bus crashing thing. The editing of this movie, I think, is its second weakest part. I think that the fact that it doesn't tie its points together and its character arcs together is the biggest flaw, and what makes it so hard for me to defend this movie. Though, as we're talking about this, I'm like, okay, there actually are a lot of ideas here that I think are really compelling. But it's the editing that's something I just have a massive issue with. Of just, like, scenes just, like, stop, and then just like, and someone's kind of thinking about something, so let's do a musical sequence. It's like, whoa, slow your horse. I mean, this is a pretty slow movie, but there are moments where the film, like, trips over itself trying to get to the next sequence, and without bothering to finish what the last idea was.
Yeah.
I think Joaquin Phoenix doesn't give a very good performance in this movie.
I would tend to agree.
Now, my bias, I don't think he's good in the first Joker. To me, it is a performance of excess, not success. I think that, but there's a beauty in that. Like, his physical performance in Joker, even if I don't like it, is no doubt captivating. He's not really given any of that material until the film's almost done.
Yeah,
definitely. I think for a long time, having Joaquin Phoenix essentially act as this meek figure means that he rarely feels like he's commanding a frame, and I understand that is in part the point.
Yeah,
but I just don't think that plays to the acting strengths of him in the first movie.
Yeah,
I don't feel like he's as motivated to be here. But I also
he probably paid a lot more.
Yes, and
sorry.
In the you can finish.
No,
your point.
I was making a joke. I was kind of inspired by my hero, the Joker, to, like,
the jokester
comedy.
I mean, that's just the point I'm making. I mean, I think it's weaker material for him to perform.
Definitely true.
It's sloppier material.
Totally.
And I mean, the word I used when we finished watching Joker 2019 the other night is Joaquin Phoenix is certainly giving a committed performance in that first film. Here, I think you feel his ego a bit more. I don't think that he or Phillips are doing anything to advance the character past a script level. There's no deeper text to the character outside of there's nothing deeper that they're developing for him in a sequel, which is what you often do in a sequel when you're featuring that same character, especially presenting them in completely different context. I think you feel Joaquin's ego here a little bit. I mean, he is playing the hits. And what is different about it is something that is meant to be a lot more flattering, when a lot of the material in the first Joker film is the opposite of flattering.
What do you mean by flattering?
I mean, he's like the new stuff that is introduced is him being like the suave musical guy, which I don't think he's good at, but he's trying.
Oh, I see.
Or
Okay.
like he's not like there's like the sense of like almost contortionism to his performance in the first film.
Mhm.
Here he's almost like voguing a lot of the time.
Sure, yeah.
It's these big like reverential like
He
lean back.
gets like with in the sequence with Steve Coogan, he owns the news presenter by breaking out into song and stuff like that, and he gets to get himself worked up a little bit. Like that is a triumphant moment for him. Whereas initially you would maybe see that as a scene where this authority figure backs Arthur down a little bit. I also don't think that Joaquin Phoenix is very good at musical presentation or musical performance.
Mhm.
I'm watching his face in these sequences, and he's not changing his face. Like he even is benefited by the presence of Joker makeup, which accentuates his features, and he's not doing anything with his face.
I actually think that the Joker makeup, especially during the musical sequences, takes away from it because it makes for me it makes him look fake. Which I guess I can see intention behind, but whenever I'm looking at his face and I can't even really tell what emotion he's making because the makeup is so stark and like I can't see what shape his mouth is supposed to be or how wide his eyes are supposed to be, that it gives it like kind of an uncanny feeling. That does take away from it. I don't think the musical sequences or his performance are as bad as either of you I felt that they were. I don't think that they're exceptional in any way. I think that they're rather static. I think that more comes down to Todd Phillips wants to make a musical, but he doesn't know how to make a musical.
It's a good point too. I would agree.
This to me is not it doesn't feel like these are poorly directed musical sequences. They just aren't directed in the way that musical sequences should be. I guess
not flashy. Like you're trying to do like a 50s like not Gene Wilder, Gene Kelly. Thank you,
Gene Wilder.
I was like not Gene Wilder.
Yeah.
Even
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman. That's right, famous musical performer. You're not doing any.
He's the President, Absolute Power, directed by Clint Eastwood.
Wow, think about that. You're not doing anything flashy like that. You're not moving the camera in interesting ways. Like, and I think it doesn't help that Joaquin is, completely blown out of the water by Lady Gaga in those moments, who I think is really good. As people have, I listened to like two different clips, one from the movie soundtrack and one from her album that she put out in conjunction with this film. And you remember that the same dichotomy is drawn in the film. When she is in character as like Lee in the more real world grounded moments, her voice, her vocal performance while she's singing is completely different than when she is in the fantasy sequences, like when she's at a club or whatever in those fantasy sequences. Her vocal performance shifts so drastically. It is just a testament to her musical performances, or her musical ability.
Yeah.
And Joaquin Phoenix is not doing that. He does not have the skill. He's not adept enough to be matching that level of performance.
Well, as you were saying last night, Lady Gaga is one of like the preeminent performers of our lifetime.
Absolutely.
And so part of it, I think, is like a miscasting that you casted too well. Of like, you have to realize that Lady Gaga is on a level so far beyond what Joaquin Phoenix is capable of that it I think undermines the Joker's power and presence in these scenes.
Well, it's interesting because I see that as strength. Not in the fact that musically, I think it does feel like a mismatch musically, but performance-wise, in terms of character presence, I feel that more in the writing than the disparate of the skill of the actors. I think Joaquin Phoenix is a great actor. And I think Lady Gaga is actually a very great actress as well. And I think that Lady Gaga as Lee Quinzel, the character, as a more grounded, messed up. She's not the bubblegum like happy-go-lucky, crazy, kooky Harley Quinn that we've seen.
She's not a Margot Robbie. She's not a.
I think she works really well as that. And I do think that in terms of the taking away power thing that you were just mentioning, I actually really like that, and I think that that's one of the strongest elements of this film is her is watching the dynamic between the two of them, as I was mentioning earlier. Her command these sequences and do these crazy things, and like it's really like her like slapping him on the face and be like, hey buddy, let's do something. Like, isn't this crazy? Like, get some energy back into you. And watching Arthur Fleck and the character and Joaquin Phoenix, the actor, react in these situations, I think is really, really compelling. Watching him like this is where I actually do think there is nuance to his character and added characterization, is him seeing something that gives him energy, that makes him happy, and watching him watch Harley, I think is fascinating because he's like being meek and he's like, no, should we watch the movie? These kind of things. He's being like the goody two shoes Joker, and then watching him like get this like look in his eyes as she starts doing something, like convincing him to bring the Joker persona out. That subtle transformation, I think, is really interesting, and the fact that she commands those sequences, and that Joker isn't a commanding, and that Arthur Fleck isn't a commanding presence for a lot of this movie, I see as a writing strength to play to like him as a character that is actually more meek and quiet.
And here's what I'll say: is that sure, if we want Harley Quinn to be the commanding force of the film, that's well and good. Put her in the movie more. That makes more sense. I think that's why the film generally lacks a sense of propulsion.
I mean, I don't know. I felt she was in it enough. I mean, I think narratively, you're right. Like, we don't get a ton of backstory. We don't see her much on her own. There are like these very fleeting glimpses of it. And it's like, oh wait, let's see more of that. And I dislike the fact that those aren't more present. It does feel like stuff, and rumors say that there is stuff that was cut out of the film, which is unfortunate. But I do think in terms of presence, I always feel Lee's presence, because after she's introduced, that's all that Arthur can think about, and she does consistently show up, and she shows up in all these sequences, and he's always thinking about her and looking at her, looking for her in the crowds and things. So I think she's a very heavy presence on this film, in a way that I think I wasn't expecting, because I'd been told that she's barely in the film, and I don't think that's true at all. I think she's like, maybe it's like literally like amount of minutes she's on this screen is not that much, but in terms of impact, in terms of presence,
time at the club, impact at the club.
Absolutely, I think there's a very disparate power there.
I think she looms large over the film. I think that Arthur Fleck just sucks as a character.
Sure,
that's my problem.
Guess what? That's the point.
Yeah, but I think it's a bad point.
Yeah, sure, fair enough.
Because Arthur Fleck is interesting in Joker 1 insofar as he's like a vehicle to like try to explore some sort of like anarchic idea, right?
But it's the downtrodden. If the big guy picks on the little guy too much, the little guys are going to team up and get him
what they fucking deserve.
Exactly.
And I think that is fine enough when the first film has a plot that brings Arthur in conversation with a wider array of characters and scenarios and things. But when I'm spending,
this is a very static film.
When I spend so much time with Arthur Fleck, it just becomes, I think that the ideological black hole at the center of this duology becomes clearer and clearer, because it's like, what is the point of Arthur Fleck as a character? And I understand that the meta text of Joker Folie Deux is that the Joker is hollow, and we shouldn't, the Joker is not this like messiah to rally behind.
You shouldn't idolize the Joker. Hot take.
But what's frustrating is like, when you make this
Todd Phillips,
when you make this 2-hour 15-minute movie where we're just sitting with Arthur Fleck, I think that it becomes evident even if you remove the last half an hour of the movie. Like, if you sit with this guy for 90 minutes, you're like, he's just fucking, nothing's going on. He's got nothing to do. He's got no goal. He's got no ideology. He makes no point when he's in Arkham.
Well, here's the thing. I actually, and maybe this is kind of similar to what the point that you guys were making saliently last week with Megalopolis, but I think that's a right choice, personally, because seeing how small Arthur Fleck is as a character and how much is projected onto him is that juxtaposition that I think is narratively very interesting in this film, is that he barely has the energy or the interest of like asking for a cigarette, and he doesn't stand up for himself in most of these situations, and he's very easily swayed by people, and he doesn't have a ton of personality or a ton of ideology, and he doesn't know how he even feels about himself, but yet people still project all this onto him, and they want him to sign his book, and they want him to perform in front of them, and everyone wants to see the trial, and crowds are lining up for him and making masks and signs. But in reality, and spending so much time with him and just seeing that he is a troubled, quiet man, I think that juxtaposition is exactly the point of this film, and I find that to be that's the point, and I think the movie absolutely nails it.
I hear what you're saying, but I think it again comes in. It does come back to, and I have to be honest with the fact that it comes back to what I come into the movie with.
Yeah, sure.
I already know this about the Joker.
Yeah.
So I don't.
I was blown away, frankly.
Wait.
When the credits came out,
People like Joker?
But my thing is like, not only do I come in with that, we're told all of this stuff for the most part. We don't even get to see like a poster for Joker's movie. We don't get to see the crowds outside of a couple shots when he's walking up to a courthouse or whatever. We're told that Lee is off on this media tour. We don't see that happen.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that if you want to try to sell this more intentionally, this idea that Joker is, or that Arthur Fleck is a feat, deeply broken, trauma-riddled man versus this like anarchic Goliath. I need to see that more. And I think that the first film does that better. In fact, when you're in the very visceral final sequence of that first film and you're watching the pandemonium in the streets, and you get a real way to visually grapple with what Joker comes to symbolize. In this film, it's riding off of that pre-existing knowledge, and I think that's ineffective. And it goes back to my idea that the whole court case is largely ineffective, insofar as that the murder of a Murray Franklin is on national TV. It's like there's really no intrigue to discovery in the courtroom. An interesting part of court drama is the discovery and the witnesses and the cross-examination, whatever, but they're here to ostensibly tell you what happened in Joker 1. And so it's like there's so much telling, there's so much reliance on that first film. I think it for me, it requires buying into that film being more than it was.
So I want to interject here. Let's talk about what happens in Joker 1 here a little bit, because the entire point, and Tucker, you're right, that clearly the point of this movie is that people are projecting onto Arthur.
Yeah,
the Joker has become a symbol now. People are projecting that onto him. The issue therein is that in the first movie, that wasn't the case. The Joker was something that Joaquin Phoenix, Arthur Fleck, became on his own accord. And then in this one, that's just gone. Like the examination of that is again thrown to the wind. Apparently,
you mean because there's the implication that it's like a split personality thing?
Yeah, I mean, and as we already agreed, that's not necessarily explored or drawn any conclusion to, and the court case is about whether or not he has split personality disorder, and sure, we already established that that's not exactly well expounded upon, because Todd Phillips is clearly much more metatextually interested in people are projecting so much onto Joker, i.e. the character, i.e. the movie that I made. He is much more interested in telling that story than he is with the cogent character arc or inspiration of Arthur Fleck. And so we completely forego the fact that the Joker isn't just a projection from people who love Arthur Fleck. He became Joker first, and then the follow-up happened. Now we're exploring a completely different thing that has nothing to do with Arthur Fleck's character arc in the first film.
Sure, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a pretty cut and dry thing for me. I have nothing else to say on that point.
I don't really have much more else to say about the movie.
Sure.
I think it doesn't look as good.
I don't think it looks as good.
I think it looks good, but I remember being blown away by that first film. And I think that the cinematography, I like the production design a lot. I love the color grading. And this. I think the shot composition is good.
It's still very well. It's still very proficiently made. Todd Phillips, love him or hate him, puts together a good team of craftsmen when he's making these Joker movies.
Yeah, and Hildur Guðnadóttir's score is fantastic. And that's where I still frankly, talking through this film and talking through each of these points, maybe this is a surprise, but I have actually come to appreciate a lot more of the thematic elements of this film and where
Mhm.
the narrative goes. I do think at the end of the day, a lot of these ideas fail to cohere
Yeah,
into something.
they're just not concluded.
But I don't think that is a end all be all for me.
Okay.
It's an end, but it's not an end all be all.
Okay.
In that there's so much that this movie presents that I think is interesting metatextually, textually, and concept and execution wise. I mean, my score has certainly raised
Sure.
since we started talking about this, and it's simply because I think this is a unique movie, and I think that it can easily be watched. I totally
You
understand.
could never make Joker Folie do today, you know?
Yeah, no. Back in the day when people could finally get a
Yeah.
$200 million musical out.
Mhm. Sorry, I completely just realized your point.
Yeah, it's
there.
fine. But
it's a unique movie. It's kind of
it is unique. And in the way that there are issues with any complicated masterpiece. I'm not saying this movie is a masterpiece, but I think there is actually a lot more here operating under the surface that I find really, really compelling from an artistic level. But I also have no problem, as hopefully you've seen this video, understanding and agreeing with, no, yeah, that doesn't work, and the editing's pretty bad, and the script can certainly be sloppy. But I think I see intent in a lot of these things that other people might see as criticisms, because again, I wasn't bored during these courtroom sequences. I think that the outward intrigue is not particularly there because we know he killed these people and like what's really going to come of that. But when I'm watching this movie and watching a movie that is a slow courtroom drama about a quiet guy, my mind is going overdrive at that moment. And to me, it's what a lot of people see in slow cinema that I don't usually really enjoy, where it's like your mind is filling in the gaps and you're creating this narrative, and it forces you to think. That's what Joker Folie do was for me, is putting myself in the mind of this person that is having so much internal conflict. It wasn't so much about how is the court case going to come out, but how is Arthur feeling about himself in any given moment. He's being influenced by the press and his desire to be a performer, and the truth that comes out about his mother and his past, and Harley and his lawyer, and all of that was like a really interesting soup for me to dig through.
Always digging through my soup.
And I didn't like the last act. I think the ending. I think he died. That he dies.
Okay, we should actually talk about that. Finish your point.
Yeah, I didn't like the last act, but this is also a long movie, so I got like an hour and 45 minutes worth of, hey, this is really, really fascinating.
I was gonna say 2 hours 20 minutes. Is Joker Folie do slow cinema? Discuss in the comments.
Is there a definition?
I don't know.
Oh.
Doesn't matter. So the end of this movie is Joker is found guilty, but then the courthouse blows up. He escapes, talks to Harley. We talked about that. Eventually, he gets captured again. He's back in prison. Hey Arthur, you got a visitor. Oh, perfect. All right, sounds good. Then the camera holds as Arthur walks out of frame. We see this guy who I don't believe had any lines in the rest of the movie.
No, but you see him kind of conniving. Like there's inserts of him conniving.
He's always
he's going to do something.
He's got a devious smile on his face, and he wants to tell Arthur a joke. And it's a joke that doesn't make any sense. Something about a psychopath getting exactly what he deserves or whatever. Yeah. And he stabs Joker, shanks him a bunch of times. Joker falls on the ground.
It's a real Caesar type situation.
Yeah, and he's dead. We talked about that already. And then in the background, as the camera slowly drifts and sort of defocuses on that guy, we drift towards Joaquin Phoenix's face as the life drains from his eyes. You see this guy like cut his face open like the Joker does, like Heath Ledger Joker does, for no reason.
I mean, I think the reason is obvious.
Okay,
and I think it's a very funny conclusion to reach if you're Todd Phillips, which is I can try to dismantle this idea of the Joker, but I can't put the genie back in the bottle.
You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
It's too late.
Sure, yeah.
The idea of the Joker is larger than the man, which is
true.
It's certainly funny.
But here's the thing. He also minutes earlier, he diffuses that point when Harley's like, you know what? I give up on being crazy because you said the Joker wasn't real. But then there's a different guy who's like, I'm the Joker now. Doesn't matter that the Joker said he wasn't
I don't
real.
think those two things are in conflict, though.
You don't
because,
think so?
like, Lee Quinzel's personal reaction to that, based on their relationship and her feeling as an obsessed person that's also talks to him a lot and now sees him for who he is really as a person, versus a guy who's
that's
even more disturbed,
Okay.
who doesn't know him personally. That is more emblematic of the people out on the streets that see him as a
Okay.
hero. I don't think those two things like clash for me personally.
I just think that Todd Phillips is like it's at the end of the day, I've done my best, but it's too late. I think that that's
Yeah.
the ending
Sure.
note of the movie, which I think is stupid.
I just can't get past the stupidity of he does it like he cuts his face open like
Well,
Heath
it's
Ledger.
even worse because the whole "you get what you deserve" is just the Murray Franklin thing again,
Yeah,
and
of
that's
course.
that's obvious. Like that's the intent.
Mhm.
But it's like, are we setting up like a cycle of Joker violence?
Yeah,
like, is that the point of this
Joker's
movie?
really about the cycle. It's really about generational trauma.
Again, I just like, for me as a human being,
Mhm.
I get a lot of like gleeful enjoyment out of the fact that this version of the Joker gets unceremoniously shanked and killed in prison.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I just
We
think
don't even get a big climactic dance in the dark ending.
No, I think that that's actually really awesome. Like, to be honest with you, I think that is awesome that Todd Phillips did that.
Mm.
I just think that, again, he doesn't know what he's saying.
If Zack Snyder had done this, the Joker would die and he'd be like out and he'd like be on like a Jesus pose and there'd be
He's
crowd
like, I'll give you a
carrying
reach around, and he blows up or whatever. Similar to the Heath Ledger Joker point, he does give like the Two-Face origin with the bomb or whatever. It's just this weird like thing that is also in the first movie where he's like lightly dancing with like DC lore,
Yeah.
as if like, because Todd Phillips could easily get away with he doesn't care. But for whatever reason, he cares like a little bit to put Easter eggs in there.
Yeah.
Why?
It's barely an Easter egg.
But like, yeah, I mean, it's not really an Easter. He's not really hidden.
No.
But it's the same thing. What?
And it doesn't
Something
matter
Crime
either
Alley
way.
in the first movie.
Yes, Crime Alley in the first,
and a little Bruce Wayne.
The presence of Bruce Wayne,
Yeah.
generally, yeah.
And this movie has a lot less of that.
Mhm.
And I think it's fine. I think that's the exact right level to operate on this. You might disagree that it's a genre subversion or whatever, but what it certainly is an adaptation subversion of. You were watching this film and you're like, that is unlike any Harley Quinn I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In tone, in style, in energy,
name.
in like she's really the MJ
Yes,
of
he
Mary
really
Jane's.
is. Yeah.
I think that it's to me the right balance of based in iconography and concept that we are generally familiar with of criminals in Gotham City and Arkham Asylum and those things, and Harvey Dent being a lawyer, but also it's just a very realistic, grounded film. There's nothing fantastical about it. We don't even see there's obviously not a Batman as far as we know. There's like not other superheroes in this world as far as we know. And I kind of like that. Like it's basically almost not an adaptation. But I think I like the fact that it keeps its own adaptation element by just sprinkling in a little bit of it is Arkham Asylum and she's kind of dressed like Harley and obviously the Joker and Harvey Dent, just these little dashes. And I think that it's just enough connective tissue where I appreciate both sides of it.
Yeah. I mean, I just find like the Matt Reeves version of grounding the adaptation a lot more interesting.
Oh, totally. I mean, so do I.
As opposed to like, yeah, he blows up and he's Two-Face now. Who cares?
Yeah.
Last thing I'll say is I would like Todd Phillips to join our Discord server and leave a one-sentence thesis statement about whether it is or is not good to take medication if you have a mental health issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's also not especially well done in this film, if you can believe it. I mean, as soon as we introduced the idea of multiple personality disorder, I'm like, Todd, we've taken like 5 steps backwards on this whole mental health narrative point.
Totally.
Yeah.
Lining up, taking your 3 pills, check under the tongue, stop taking your pills.
It is an 80s movie. It's set in the 80s.
Yes, right.
And so it's really a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest type situation.
Oh, sure, okay.
Which is, hey, both great movies.
Also, Joker gets sexually assaulted by police in the...
Yeah, that's really weird.
That's something
that is the thing that happens that presumably causes him to want to stop being the Joker. That is the thing that happens before he has his breakdown in court.
Yeah, what do we make of that?
I don't know. I don't know what Todd Phillips would make of that either, frankly.
Again, I think that this is the part of the fact that I think the last act is ridiculous and sloppy, and the bomb going off is out of fucking nowhere, and this thing happened. This is less out of nowhere because they obviously are abusive to the inmates in general, and it's not like we couldn't see this energy coming from those guys, but it just happens, and then it just happens.
Mm.
And a lot of these elements and him being the Joker and leaving that behind, that this last act is a mess.
Mm.
And that's a great part of it. A great example of that being a mess of in a film that understood its own the impact of its own scenes better, especially as the film is wrapping up. That would have been something that we then linger on and spend a little bit of time unpacking, but there's a hard cut. And then, like, I would not be surprised if many audience members were like, "Oh, I kind of forgot," or like, there's plenty of stupid people out there who don't understand filmmaking, but it's like, "Oh, I didn't even realize it's like that was what was happening." Like, you can see that, and it's just because, yeah, you're right. He doesn't know. I don't know why that's included, frankly.
Because he was sexually abused as a boy, and that's what put the Joker persona in him.
And then they took it out.
4 out of 10 for me.
4 out of 10 for me as well.
I'm gonna go 7.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Really like this movie.
I like this movie more than the first Joker.
I think it's worse than the first Joker.
We span the gamut, ladies and gentlemen.
The Joker Folie 3. Or the Jokester, sorry, the Jokester, which is the credited name of a character in this movie.
Who gets also killed by the police off screen, kind of. And then
he is killed.
Yep, they kill him.
Yeah.
Cops kill him.
Yep.
There you go.
Kill him because he won't stop singing All the Saints Come Marching In.
Yeah,
that's right.
They keep singing that in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Mom sent you a Snapchat.
She did send me a Snapchat. What do you think? It's probably with a dog. You ready?
It's a message.
Hang on. Oh, it's a fucking...
Did you think it'd be inappropriate or something?
I don't know. It might be personal. But no, it's me 10 years ago.
Oh, with the trumpet.
Yeah.
I didn't know you played trumpet.
Yeah, I played trumpet in middle school, and then when they moved me up to high school,
You got a boner.
I got a boner.
You ever play skin flute?
I did not.
Can you baby bird feed me water during the review? Like you just drink something, you like dribble.
Oh,
into
I
my
see.
mouth.
You
I do this,
and
you just dribble into my mouth.
I'll dribble in your mouth.